Do you ever think about
Hmm.
you think about doing a drawing streams?
That my drawing is very bad.
Well,
Like,
good, because you can you can have Twitch chat help. So,
yeah, right. We didn't talk about that, did we?
no,
Yeah. So you're making a critter extension.
I am. So, my wife streams sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
and she uses Krita for digital painting. And one day, randomly, when she was drawing, one of her chatters was like, "Dude, it'd be funny if we could like mess with what you were doing." And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, "Holy shit, you're a fucking genius!" And I started looking because I was like, "Wait, somebody has to have made this. This
Mm-hmm.
seems too obvious." And I looked for like a day or two, and I was like, "Fuck, there's nothing." Huh. Okay. Well, let me do a little reading.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a little reading in terms of like how do you make a credit extension? How's it gotta be laid out?
Yeah.
Uh and had to figure out how to solve some problems because of how I wanted to build it.
Mm-hmm.
But as of right now, I do actually have a functioning extension. If you start it, Twitch chat can put in certain commands that will do very basic things to your credit instance, like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that's what the colors you're using or change the brush size. That's the basic stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had plans later to not make it just chat based, but it could like listen to like channel redeems and stuff
Yeah.
to do the
Yeah.
same things and do more potentially dangerous things. Like I'm pretty sure I saw an example of this. I'm pretty sure there's a way programmatically in the Krita Python plugin stuff that if you give like a URL, you can literally just pull a fucking image and just load it into the document. So that's fucking, I can picture someone just being like, okay, yeah, point redeem
That
here, put this image in your
you
project.
know that one. Look, if it can be done, I think that's one we need to avoid doing. If you don't want it to get banned from Twitch.
He's it was that it's like he got so obsessed if he could he didn't stop to think if he should.
If you were going to do that, I think it's much safer to have a list of images that can be loaded in.
Or I would at least make it configurable. Or like
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
maybe
yeah.
the
I
person
wouldn't
can
let
like I don't know,
arbitrary
whitelist domains or shit.
yeah. Arbitrary URLs would be maybe it has it as an option, but yeah, that would be very dangerous. Very, very dangerous. Um, like what is a what is a what is a critter extension written in?
Python.
Oh, okay. I thought it was gonna be some like internal like weird language.
Yeah, I don't know when they added at some point. That's not like a thing that's always been around. At some point they added in kind of like this. I looked through Krita's source code because I was
Mhm.
like there was nothing there that gave me like auto completion in terms of like what was actually in the Krita package.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know like why is there a Krita package here? I don't know if that's here. And
Mhm.
apparently I think they use some kind of build tool that basically dynamically creates like some kind of binding between the Qt code and the Python
Oh.
version of Qt stuff.
Yep.
So, but that's basically what it is from what I can tell.
Mhm.
Uh, basically, it's just like it has to be structured in a certain way where it apparently uses like a desktop file, like a .desktop file, to sort of like list out like the metadata about the plugin.
Right.
Then it expects to like point that to a directory, and then that has to basically load the Python code.
Mhm.
That's actually the reason why I had to figure out something interesting I hadn't had to do with Python before, which is
Oh.
vendor the dependencies.
Ah. Okay.
So, because I wanted to know, like, can you even do that? I have no idea.
Mhm.
I've only ever written like one-off scripts. I never wrote like a Python project per
Yeah.
se.
Yeah.
Um, and I read about it, and apparently, like, pip, the package manager stance is like, we're not fucking with it, basically, because it's too big a pain in the ass. And they had a perfectly reasonable reason, which is for the vast majority of time, that's not the solution you want to go for.
Right. Right.
Like most of the time, you just want to go with the, oh, does your thing have dependencies? Well, just let pip resolve and install the shit.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Um, if there's a situation where you can't rely on pip being a thing, then the general next step down is just to package the whole thing as an executable.
Right.
But then in these really weird one-off cases, this being one of them, where I can't rely on pip being available, and I can't bundle as an executable because it has to be, the source code has to be available in a format. Now I have to vendor the shit.
Right.
So there actually is a tool literally called vendoring. And there's not much documentation about it because it's used by very few things, pip being one of them. And basically what it does is it reads the same kind of file that like pip does to install dependencies. What it does is it pulls down the source code and actually rewrites the imports in the source code to use the local version.
Okay.
And there's a bunch of little like caveats you have to figure out sometimes. Like it can't do that with imports that use dot notation. Like import something dot something dot something.
Yeah,
it won't. It doesn't like that. If that happens, you have to. There's like a step you have to do. You have to. So assuming you're in like a Git repo, you have to like commit after you've pulled the vendor stuff down, and vendors complained that it can't do it. You have to change the code so that it's the way it likes it, not using dot notations. You have to create a patch file using a git diff and put it in a directory, and there's like a configuration thing to say like, here's my patches. Then run it again, and what it'll do is it'll pull it down, apply the patch, then rewrite the code. That's how I had to get like 3 or 4 things to actually vendor correctly. And the only other caveat I haven't run into this is you can only vendor stuff that's written in pure Python. You cannot vendor stuff that has like C bindings or something.
Right. That makes sense. That's so stupid. It's so dumb.
So I got that to work. And I actually, doing this gave me an idea for another project that I started on too, which is inspired by the OBS WebSocket. Thing, which is basically a embedded REST API that allows you to programmatically control Krita.
Okay.
Just because I'm sure people could think of interesting things to do with that.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Because that's basically just making a library version of that Twitch integration anyway. Because like it's just making a
kinda.
Yeah, it's giving you that control to modify it without having to go through the idea of using it through Twitch.
Yeah. And see, I at one point I was actually contemplating these being 2 separate things anyway, because part of me was like, well, it feels kind of like weird and bloated to have like this one extension that like is also a Twitch bot and also like can interact with Twitch's APIs and does the Krita control stuff. I did contemplate literally just being like one thing that's literally all it is a Twitch bot.
Yeah.
And it would specifically talk to the other extension that actually controls it over HTTP request. Yeah. But I decided I was trying to think of like from a user's perspective, it would probably be better if there was just one thing that's just, oh, I just fill out my stuff and ta-da, it just works.
Yeah.
Rather than having to like orchestrate 2 or 3 things that when this thing happens, it has to send a request over to this address. Yeah, that seems a little...
So what you're saying is the Unix philosophy is confusing and stupid.
Sometimes it is, yeah.
Yeah.
But the thing I was using to do the other project, so there's a Python API framework called Fast API. That's what I'm basically following the same approach where I'm trying to vendor the whole dependency chain. Oh, that's something I should mention about that. It does not automatically resolve downstream dependencies. Your ass gotta go dig that shit out yourself. Like this was literally the process.
Mhm.
I vendor Fast API. I noticed in Fast API's iProject.tom or whatever, it says like, oh, it relies on these two things. Okay, I put those in there too. Vendor try to run it, get an error. Cannot this cannot import this. This package doesn't exist. Okay.
Okay.
Which one was that? Okay. I go to whatever the other product. I think it was like Starlet, which is like a server thing that Fast API sits on top of. Okay, it was this error. What does this need? What needs this, and this, and this? Okay, put those in. Run it again. This package doesn't exist. Okay, go to that. What is that?
So you're gonna vendor down the entire chain.
Pretty much. At least as far as my code's touching. I probably didn't put in every single thing, but my code's not touching those paths. I don't give a fuck.
Sure, yeah. Well, you don't need to support everything. It just needs to be supporting what you need.
Yes, sir.
That is such a mess.
But since I actually have that extension working, and funny enough, I had a bug that turns out wasn't my bug. If I tried to stop the chatbot from the GUI, then start it again, it would hang. It would freeze up.
Okay.
And I was like, well, that's weird. And I managed to figure out that it wasn't anything I was doing. It's just the way that package was written. It just had a bug where it just hung when it tried to start again, just because I think the state wasn't being cleaned up correctly.
Yeah.
But I joined that Discord server and I brought it up. The shit, they fixed it fucking 3 hours later.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, damn, I like this.
Wow, that's impressive.
I think it was like not even like an hour before we started. I saw in the message, because he has like the GitHub notification stuff set up in that channel. I saw, boop, new version available. I went, okay, changed my vendors.txt thing, resynced my vendoring stuff, ran again. Hey, you can turn the chat bot on and off now. Cool.
Seems like a pretty useful feature.
Yeah.
So you said it's like basically working now. So is it ready to use, or is there still more to do?
Technically it's usable in its current state. The only part I have to write docs for, because because you're running your own chatbot as part of the extension, you technically have to make your own Twitch developer application thing to get your own client ID and client secret. So I'm gonna do it right up so somebody that can clue what that is knows how to do it.
Right.
But once that's done, it's everything else should be explanatory in the config and stuff. Yeah.
So can you configure like how much of an effect things are gonna have, or?
So my plan is, because it's purely chat based right now, there's going to be a configuration setting that controls kind of like a cooldown when someone uses it, so they can't just spam and fuck up whatever the hell you're doing. That I also want it to be able to just turn off just certain things not being able to be messed with. Like if somebody doesn't want somebody to be able to change the size of their brush, they can just turn it off.
Yeah.
Basic things like that, really.
This is such a ridiculous project. I love it.
It is. Well, I mean, if not this week, then next week, I'm definitely gonna send you a private clip that's gonna get made when somebody's trolling the fuck out of my wife while she's streaming.
I absolutely want to see that, without a doubt. Oh, I will.
I know
make
exactly
sure
what's gonna happen too.
Sorry.
I know exactly what's going to happen too. Somebody's going to go brush size 500 pixels right in the middle of her drawing.
Oh, so they can specify what they want to set it to.
Yeah, so I only have 4 commands on there right now.
Okay.
There's one that switches the primary and the foreground and background color you're using.
Yeah.
One changes the foreground, one changes the background, and one changes the brush size. The ones that change the foreground, the background, you have to give it RGB values.
Yeah.
And then the brush size, you just put out a number in pixels. But assuming that you gave it stuff it can actually use, it'll just do it on the UI.
I presume you've tested it with things that are not RGB values.
Yes. There's a because it has to convert it into an int because everything's a string.
Yeah.
If it can't convert it into an int, I have a thing to catch it and go,
Okay.
hey, that's wrong.
Because I can quickly, I can see that going very, very badly, very quickly if you hadn't done that.
Well, even if because I had to figure out at a certain point that I had to actually convert the things coming in from chat into like actual like ints like that Python says is an int.
Yeah.
Because otherwise it just kind of like quietly errored out and didn't do anything.
Mm.
The extension was still running, it just didn't do anything when you put the chat command in.
Python, I think Python does do some silent. Maybe I'm thinking of a different language. I thought Python did some silent conversion if you just let it pass some stuff around.
It probably does, but I just know in this one case it wasn't, and
Yeah.
maybe it was doing. It might be because the code that eventually gets handled. Remember, these are just like Python bindings to like C++ code.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
maybe it doesn't like that.
Well, it's always safer to be more explicit with it anyway, just in case you
Yeah,
want to do some error handling.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that goes well. And
I'll find out.